2025 Ford Ranger. This is a truck we've now covered twice. This is the second generation T6 Ranger. We covered it at its launch event and a solo video on its bigger, more fun brother, the Ranger Raptor. This is a Lariat trim level, and to be entirely honest, we were not very nice about the original T6 generation Raptor. Not because it was inherently a terrible truck, but we felt that it was an afterthought from Ford. They clearly did not put a lot of effort in it. The drivetrain calibration was quite poor. I didn't think it rode that well. The interior space felt very, very generic. They've done a good job addressing many of those issues. So let's briefly walk you through what this truck is technically. Second generation of this T6 Ranger. They have lengthened and widened the frame by about 2 inches. They've changed some of the packaging for the rear suspension. They pushed these shocks outward in the shock mounts to give you more bed space so you can have a flat load floor. So if you want to put like a pallet of wood back there, it shouldn't be an issue anymore. There's side steps in the side of the bumper to make it easier to get in and out of it. You have a 120 and a regular power outlet back there. It has about like 17 or 1800 pounds of payload, and you can tow 7,500 pounds with a trailer. Ford has done a good job making this a very usable mid-sized truck. Interior space, lots of headroom, reasonable legroom for the front occupants. The back seats are not huge, but a full-size adult should fit back there. Rear seats can fold up or down. Again, usability is key in a truck like this. Front seats are not class leading by any means. Honestly, none of the mid-sized trucks at their non-performance trim levels have great seats, but they're fine. This Lariat trim level has heated steering wheel and heated seats. It also has a Bang & Olufsen audio system, which is average. Basically, it's all bass and all highs, no mids. This has Ford's touchscreen for the Ranger. It's okay. You still have physical controls for your infotainment, like volume and basic HVAC controls. However, for a lot of the modes, you have to tap away through the screens. With gloves, it doesn't always work that well. If you want to activate your heated seats or heated steering wheel, it's also on the screen. You do have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and you have a wireless charger, which does a reasonable job. The seats themselves, again, on the average side, but good headroom, and the interior storage throughout this car is pretty good, though the door pockets are too small for a full-size like Nalgene bottle or reusable bottle. So let's go take this for a quick drive. Setting off in the Ford Ranger Lariat trim with a 2.7 liter V6. All right, first things first, did they improve the drivetrain calibration? And definitively, I will say yes. I've driven this both as the 2.3 and as the 2.7. Obviously, 100 foot-pounds of torque difference between both vehicles and quite a bit of horsepower difference. But the main thing is it does no longer surge, even in the 2.3, when you're just putting around. There used to be this surginess in its power band. It would sort of like buck back and forth depending on where you were in the throttle travel. That is no longer the case. You know, the 10-speed automatic that Ford developed with GM in these trucks has always been a mixed bag for me. Never felt it was necessarily the fastest gearbox, at least in truck applications, or the smoothest. And at least in my week with this vehicle, it seems for the most part to be a little less gear hunty, and I haven't had any of the large like shudders or thunks that plagued the Ranger and still has some issues in the F-150s. Steering, basic inputs in this vehicle. For a truck, they've done their best to pull any slop out of the front end. It's fairly responsive again for a truck. The rear, it deals fairly well with smaller bumps. However, in very, very large impacts, there's still that harshness that you're expecting from a truck like this. I have not driven this thing fully loaded with a full payload in the back with a trailer, so I'm sure it gets a little bit more compliant when you load up the rear of this vehicle. But if you are just going to be using this to commute day in and day out, it's not totally miserable. If I'm going to be honest, I actually think it rides better than probably the Colorado does, and it definitely rides better than the Tacoma. And again, the closest thing to the spiritual successor to the V6 Tacoma is the Frontier. And while I'm sure that thing is bulletproof, it does by far feel the most archaic in this class.
They took their Lariat to the woods. After an argument about the interior door storage, things got heated. Talks of trading his prized truck for a Santa Cruz seemed un-American. so he decided to bury their differences in the woods.
The way this V6 delivers power, lots and lots of torque. It pulls reasonably hard to its sub 6,000 RPM redline and returns average fuel economy. It's very, very cold. It's the middle of winter here in the Chicagoland area, and I'm getting less than 20 miles per gallon. Figure with the non-winter fuel blends and the temps that it's having to deal with, you're probably getting on the highway slightly above 20. Honestly, no big complaints. I mean, the one sort of input that I will bring up is the brakes in this thing feel very, very soft. I'm not sure if it's this particular truck, which only has like 4,000 miles on it, or it's the brake calibration. It's something I did obviously not notice in the Ranger Raptor and in my brief period of time in the regular 2.3 Ranger. This particular truck has very, very soft brakes. You have to get fairly deep into the pedal to get the requisite amount of brake force that you're asking for. They're not touchy. They just don't feel like they're going to stop this truck, which does sap out some of its confidence. And I imagine if you do have this thing fully loaded with a large payload, it's going to make that feeling even worse. This is a competitive class of vehicle. I think it's going to come down to what you want. Outside of the performance variants of all these trucks, this is a Lariat. It's like a limited when it comes to the Tacoma, or I have no idea what the Colorado variant is. I know they have a luxury variant. The thing that this offers over all of its competitors, other than the Frontier, and I mean, you could argue the Ridgeline, but it's not really a body on frame truck, is the fact that this has a V6. And the V6, I don't know how reliable it's going to be long term, but it does add something to this driving experience. It makes it feel more refined than it probably is. Again, none of these trucks are luxury vehicles in this class of vehicle, but this EcoBoost V6 is great. It does a good job. The gearbox is well calibrated. I have no real complaints with this vehicle, and unlike the old Ranger, I am not actively miserable behind the wheel of this car. So with that, let's head into the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the Ford Ranger Lariat. So what do you need to know? Well, first off, this was a Wednesday video. This was a very quick look at this truck. We've already done 2 fairly comprehensive videos on the Ranger, both from its launch program and a standalone on the Ranger Raptor, a truck I genuinely adore. Today's market is much different. Everything other than the Ranger only has 4 cylinders. The Tacoma has some teething pains that didn't exist in the past, and the Colorado is a Colorado. Though, to be fair to Chevy, it is actually very, very good. So what does the Ranger do well? Well, I think the V6 is a welcome addition in this space. It makes the drivetrain feel more refined. The gearbox calibration is much better than it used to be in Ford products, and the interior space feels more upscale. The changes they made to bed packaging and the overall interior is a welcome change. I think it's a more practical vehicle than it used to be and a more pleasant place to be in. If you're spending as much money as you were going to on new trucks, they have to do everything pretty well, because likelihood is they're going to be your only vehicle or your do everything vehicle. I think Ford has done a pretty good job with the Ranger, and I think if you are going to buy a vehicle in this space, it is worth taking a look at. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon.